At the Labor Day dinner table, everything felt normal at first. The house smelled like grilled ribs, the kind my dad always made this time of year. Everyone was talking lightly, passing bowls, pretending it was just another family meal. But my dad kept watching me like he was waiting for the right moment to drop something heavy. When he finally cleared his throat, the whole room went quiet. Then he looked straight at me and said the words that broke something inside me. "We're selling the family business, and you're getting nothing." For a second, I honestly thought he was joking. I waited for him to laugh, or at least explain. But he didn't. His face stayed flat and cold, like this was some normal announcement. My mom stared at her plate, and my sister Claire kept her eyes fixed on her drink. No one said a word. It felt like the world thinned out around me, like everything I'd worked for suddenly slipped through my fingers before I even had the chance to tighten my grip. I'd been part of that company since I was 14. I spent summers sweeping floors, cleaning tools, digging trenches. As I got older, I moved into handling jobs no one else wanted, taking late-night calls, fixing mistakes, and keeping things going even when we were short on people. My dad used to pat my shoulder and say, "Your time's coming." I believed him. I shaped my whole life around that belief. And now he was acting like all those years were nothing more than chores he expected from me. When I asked him why, he didn't even look guilty. He said the deal was done, that it was best for the family. But I couldn't figure out how I wasn't part of that family when it came to the business. He didn't explain how my name had suddenly vanished from the future. He didn't explain why he made this decision without even telling me the company was in talks for a sale. He just acted like this outcome made perfect sense. The worst part wasn't even the shock. It was realizing everyone already knew. My mom couldn't look at me because she'd clearly chosen silence over honesty. My sister's face showed nothing, which told me she was fine with this. She wanted this. She finally had her victory, even if it cost me everything. Sitting there, hearing forks tap plates and nobody daring to breathe too loud, I felt something inside me shift. It wasn't just sadness. It was a clear understanding that this betrayal wasn't sudden. It was planned. Quiet. Careful. They made sure I wouldn't see it coming. They let me put in the work, the hours, the loyalty, while they prepared a future I wasn't allowed to be part of. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I just sat there, listening to my heartbeat echo in my ears, realizing I had been pushing my life forward for people who never intended to give me the place they promised. And that was the moment I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The days after that dinner felt unreal, like I was walking through someone else's life. I kept trying to tell myself there had to be a mistake, that maybe my dad rushed the decision, or there was something he hadn't explained. But deep down, I knew the truth was going to hurt more than anything he said at that table. And it did. When I started digging, the pieces came together faster than I expected. Little things I had ignored suddenly made sense. Claire had been visiting the office more often even though she never cared about the business. My mom had been strangely protective of certain documents, always closing drawers when I walked into the room. My dad had changed passwords on systems I used daily, brushing me off with, just trying to keep things organized. I didn't see it then. I see it now. They had been planning the sale for months. Every detail was set up slowly, so I wouldn't notice. They moved assets into new accounts under their names. They shifted ownership percentages by filing paperwork when I wasn't around. Step by step, they pushed me out of the company without ever saying a word to me. They erased my stake like it never existed. And the worst part was that they did it calmly, without hesitation, as if removing me was the most natural thing in the world. Claire played a bigger part in it than I realized. She had always been the favorite, smart, polished, the one my parents bragged about. My dad believed she deserved the reward, because she went to college and had the kind of life he respected. I didn't fit that picture. I stayed home. I worked in the dirt and heat. I built the business with my hands. None of that counted to them. In their eyes, I was useful only as long as I was working. The moment money came into the picture, they showed me where I truly stood. When I found emails and documents confirming their plans, I felt something break inside me. Not anger at first, just a deep, heavy sadness that sat in my chest like a stone. I realized that all the extra hours I worked, all the weekends I skipped hanging out with friends, all the times I answered emergency calls in the middle of the night. I did all of that because I believed I was building a future for our family. I thought loyalty meant something. I thought effort mattered. But to them, I was only convenient. I was free labor. I was the person they could depend on until something better came along. A buyer with more money, a future where Claire could shine, a plan that no longer included me. I kept thinking back to moments from my childhood, like the times my dad told me he was proud of me, or when my mom said I was the one keeping the company running. Remembering those words hurt more now because I finally understood they didn't mean any of it. They said those things to keep me close, to keep me working, to keep me blind. Standing there with the truth in my hands, I felt my childhood fold in on itself. All the trust, all the memories, all the belief that we were a team, gone. It wasn't just a business they took from me. It was the idea of family I had carried my whole life. When I finally gathered the courage to talk to my dad after the truth came out, I hoped, just for a second, that he might show even a little guilt. Maybe an apology. Maybe some kind of explanation that made sense. But instead, he looked at me with that same cold expression he had at the dinner table and said I should feel grateful to be part of the family at all. Like simply being their son meant I already had more than I deserved. Hearing that hit harder than anything else. It told me exactly how little I meant to him beyond the work I did. Claire didn't make things any easier. She smiled in that smug way she always did when she knew she had won. Then she told me I should find a real job now, as if the years I spent building the company from the ground up didn't count. It was her way of reminding me that she had taken the future I worked for and wasn't even ashamed of it. Their words burned. They wanted me to accept their betrayal quietly, to walk away thinking I had no right to be angry. I felt the humiliation rising in my chest, but I refused to let them see how deep the hurt went. I stood up, pushed my chair back, and left the table before my voice could crack. I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout. I just walked out, feeling a mix of pain and disbelief that I didn't even have the language for. The next morning, I went to the office to gather my things. I thought maybe I could at least take the personal items from my desk, photos, notebooks, tools I'd bought with my own money. But when I got there, my desk was already empty. Completely cleared out. Like I had never worked there at all. The spot where my computer used to be was bare, and even the drawers were washed out and wiped clean. I tried logging into my work files, the ones I had spent years building, blueprints, client notes, project budgets. Every password I entered was denied. Someone had locked me out of everything. It wasn't enough for them to take the business. They needed to erase every trace that I had ever contributed to it. It felt like being deleted from my own life. As I stood in that empty space, I realized how much thought they had put into cutting me off. This wasn't a rushed decision. This was something they planned down to the smallest detail, making sure there was no room for me to hold on to anything, not even a memory of the work I did. I walked out of the office with nothing in my hands, nothing to pack, nothing left to claim. The place that had been my second home since I was a teenager now felt like a stranger's building. And as the door closed behind me, I felt the full weight of what they had done. They didn't just betray me. They didn't just take what I earned. They erased me like I never mattered in the first place. That was the moment when all the hurt started to transform into something else, something sharper, something steadier, something that wouldn't let me stay silent anymore. Walking out of that empty office left me with a kind of numbness I had never felt before. But after the numbness came something sharper, cleaner, clarity. If they had gone out of their way to erase me, then they were hiding something. And if they were hiding something, they were bound to have missed a piece of it. I knew the company inside and out. I had managed years of paperwork, digital files, and records that no one else bothered to understand. If they wanted me gone, I needed to find what they overlooked. I went home and pulled out my old laptop, the one I used before my dad switched everyone to new devices. I hadn't turned it on in years, but it still held backups of contracts, payroll logs, and tax filings from the time I managed the back end. I also dug out dusty storage boxes from the garage, filled with old binders and paperwork no one cared about, except me. I spent hours flipping through folders, clicking through files, and scanning for anything that didn't fit. It didn't take long for little red flags to appear. Some signatures on documents didn't match the timelines. Numbers on payroll records didn't line up with the tax forms. But what made my stomach twist was a set of emails I found saved on an old hard drive. They were between my dad and Claire, messages full of planning, money talk, and deadlines. And the worst one was right there in the middle. Claire telling my dad they needed to sell the company before my ownership percentage legally vested. Before the date I was supposed to officially gain my share. Before I could claim anything. That one email shattered everything. This wasn't just favoritism. This wasn't just hurt feelings. This was a plan built around greed, timing, and shutting me out at the exact moment I was supposed to finally get what I was promised. They weren't taking the business from me because they believed Claire could handle it better. They were taking it before I had the legal right to fight for my part of it. I read the email over and over, feeling a cold anger settle into place. Claire pushed him. She wanted control, money, recognition. Everything she thought she deserved just because she had a degree and a polished smile. And my dad agreed because he never saw me as someone worthy of ownership. I was just the worker who kept things running while they planned their future. But their planning created mistakes. Financial irregularities. Documents filed in the wrong order. Dates that didn't line up. They had moved quickly, too quickly, and in their rush to cut me out, they left trails they didn't expect anyone to find. That was when everything changed for me. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was deliberate. It was strategic. And it might even be illegal. They wanted me gone so badly that they risked everything. And as I sat there in the dim light of my living room, surrounded by old papers and open files, I realized something important. They underestimated me. For the first time since the dinner, I felt something like power return to me, not loud, not wild, but steady. If they wanted to erase me, then this paper trail was the part they missed. And it was going to be the part that brought everything crashing down. Sitting alone with all those documents spread across my coffee table, I knew I couldn't handle this on my own. The truth was heavy, and I needed someone who understood both the business world and the kind of people my father and sister were turning into. That's when I thought of James Harlow. He had been a contractor for decades before he retired, and he was the one who taught me how to read contracts, negotiate prices, and spot dishonesty in the smallest details. He wasn't family, but he had always treated me with more respect than my own father ever did. I called him and asked if I could come by. When I showed up with a box full of documents, he didn't ask questions. He just sat down at his kitchen table, put on his reading glasses, and started going through everything quietly. I watched his face as he flipped through pages and opened files, waiting for him to say something, anything. When he finally looked up, the expression on his face told me I hadn't imagined the betrayal. He sighed and shook his head slowly, then said the words I had been scared to admit to myself. "Son, they didn't just betray you. They stole from you." Hearing that from someone I trusted settled something deep inside me. This wasn't about emotions anymore. This wasn't just about feeling unwanted or overlooked. It was about being robbed. It was about people who were supposed to protect me choosing instead to take advantage of me. James said the situation was serious enough that I needed to document everything carefully, step by step. He told me to be patient, to avoid confronting them too soon, and to gather as much proof as I could. With his help, I started building a case. We created folders, labeled dates, compared signatures, and highlighted all the irregularities. It felt strange seeing my own life laid out in paperwork like that, but it also made everything clearer. James helped me reach out to former employees, people who had quit or been pushed out years earlier. Many of them weren't surprised when I explained what was happening. Some even told me stories about things they had seen my dad and Claire do, corner cutting, money shifting, and decisions that put people at risk just to save a few dollars. A few of them signed statements, confirming what they witnessed. Every signature felt like a small piece of my truth being restored. James kept reminding me not to act out of anger. "Don't go yelling at them," he said. "Yelling doesn't fix anything. Proof does." And he was right. My father had always twisted emotions to make himself look like the victim. If I confronted them without evidence, they'd find a way to make it seem like I was overreacting or being dramatic. But if I walked in with facts, solid, undeniable facts, they wouldn't be able to run from it. For the first time since the dinner, I felt steady. Not healed, not whole, but focused. I wasn't going to break down in front of them. I wasn't going to beg for answers or acceptance. I was going to confront them on my own terms, with the one thing they couldn't silence or erase: the truth. Once James and I organized everything, I didn't make any big moves right away. I didn't confront my dad. I didn't confront Claire. I didn't even step near the office. I just waited, and waiting was enough. Word travels fast in our town, especially in the business world. People who had known my family for years began to hear small things. Quiet whispers about paperwork issues, missing signatures, and sudden changes in ownership. I didn't spread anything myself. I didn't have to. The truth has a way of leaking out when people try too hard to hide it. It didn't take long before the cracks started to show. My dad had always cared deeply about his reputation in the local contractor circle. Claire depended on her image even more. So when their new business partners began asking questions, they felt the pressure immediately. Meetings that were supposed to be smooth suddenly became tense. Decisions were delayed. Deals were reconsidered. People wanted answers about the inconsistencies they were finding, and neither of them had a believable explanation. I heard from a former coworker that they were scrambling, calling accountants, trying to rewrite timelines, even blaming clerical errors. But nothing they said matched the documents already floating around the community. Their story kept changing. And when a story keeps changing, people stop trusting it. While all this was happening, I stayed completely silent. I didn't call them. I didn't show up anywhere near them. I didn't defend myself, and I didn't attack them. Silence can be louder than shouting, and mine was loud enough to make them nervous. I knew they were wondering what I had found, what I knew, who I had talked to. They were feeling the same uncertainty they had forced on me. That's when the messages started. At first they were just short, sharp texts from my dad asking if I had been talking to anyone. Then he accused me of spreading lies, even though I hadn't said a single word. Claire's messages were worse. She sent long paragraphs blaming me for trying to ruin the family and destroying everything Dad built. She said I was being dramatic and ungrateful, pretending like I was the victim when they had done what was best for everyone. Reading their messages didn't make me angry the way they expected. Instead, it made things very clear. They were scared, really scared, and fear made them lash out. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about losing control of the image they worked so hard to protect. They didn't care about the truth, only about being exposed. Late at night, my phone would buzz with their desperate attempts to twist the story, to guilt me into stepping back, to convince me I was overreacting. They tried everything: shame, manipulation, emotional pressure. But none of it worked anymore. I wasn't the person who believed their promises. I wasn't the son who trusted their word. I had seen too much, learned too much, and grown past the point of wanting their approval. They thought I was ruining the family. But deep down, I knew something they refused to admit. The family had already been ruined the moment they chose greed over blood, money over loyalty, and themselves over me. And now, for the first time, they were finally facing the consequences of their own choices. When the rumors grew stronger and my family's panic became obvious, I knew it was time to take the next step. Waiting had done its job. Now I needed to make everything official. I made an appointment with an attorney, someone James highly recommended because he handled business disputes and cases involving fraudulent transfers. I walked into his office with a heavy box full of documents, emails, signatures, and statements from former employees. He spent hours reviewing everything. He didn't rush. He didn't look confused. He just kept reading, highlighting, and sorting pages into small piles while I sat across from him, trying to stay calm. When he finally leaned back in his chair, he didn't hesitate. He said the case was solid, strong enough not only to challenge the sale, but to fight for my rightful ownership share. He explained that what they did wasn't just unfair. It could legally be considered intentional misconduct. That meant I had a real chance of getting justice. Hearing that lifted a weight off my chest I didn't even realize I was still carrying. We filed the lawsuit quietly. Within a few days, legal papers were prepared and ready to be delivered. I didn't know how my father and Claire would react, but part of me knew it wouldn't be calm or respectful. The day they were served, my phone blew up. First came the angry calls, then the furious texts. My dad accused me of betrayal. Claire typed out long messages saying I was destroying the family name. They used every guilt tactic they knew, acting confused, offended, heartbroken. But none of that mattered anymore. Their words didn't shake me like they used to. For the first time, I had something stronger than their manipulation: evidence. And the law wasn't interested in their emotional games. It only cared about what was on paper, and I had plenty. Once the legal papers hit their hands, it didn't stay quiet for long. The business community began to see them differently. People who once respected my father now whispered about shady accounting and hidden deals. Claire, who loved attention and admiration, suddenly found herself avoiding public places because she could feel the stares. Former partners distanced themselves. Contractors who used to greet them warmly now stepped back and kept conversations short. They weren't seen as victims. They weren't seen as a hardworking family trying to do the right thing. They were seen as people who tried to cheat their own son. What hit them hardest wasn't the lawsuit. It was losing their reputation. My father cared more about how he looked in the community than anything else. And Claire, who always believed she was admired, now felt her image slipping through her fingers. They kept blaming me in message after message, calling me ungrateful and selfish. But the truth was clear. I wasn't the one who broke our family. I wasn't the one who manipulated documents. I wasn't the one who erased someone's future for money. All I did was refuse to stay silent. The legal reckoning had begun, and there was no going back. For the first time, they were facing consequences. Not excuses, not empty apologies, but real consequences based on the choices they made. And I finally felt like I was standing on solid ground again. When the lawsuit became official, everything my father and Claire built their lives around started to crack. The buyer, the one they were depending on to take the business off their hands, took one look at the legal filings and immediately stepped back. No one wants to inherit a messy dispute, especially one involving ownership issues and accusations of misconduct. Within a week, the buyer officially withdrew. The deal was dead. That alone sent my father into a panic. He had already counted on that money. He had made plans. He had promised things to people. And now it was all gone. Claire took it just as hard. She had dreamed of using the sale to launch her own projects. And now everything she counted on was slipping away. Instead of admitting their mistakes, they did what they always did. They blamed me. They spoke to anyone willing to listen, painting me as the ungrateful son who suddenly decided to destroy the business out of jealousy. They said I was lying, that I was trying to get money I didn't earn. They used every trick to make themselves look like victims. But this time, people didn't fall for it. Former employees, people who had stayed silent for years, finally found the courage to speak up. One by one, they came forward with their own stories. They talked about the unpaid overtime, the way my father cut corners to save money, the way Claire treated people like they were beneath her. Some shared how they were pressured into signing contracts they didn't understand. Others described being blamed for Claire's mistakes just to protect her image. Their stories spread fast. And when the community heard how many people had been mistreated, my father and sister's excuses stopped sounding believable. People who once respected them now questioned everything they did. Jobs they were hoping to get turned them away. Partnerships they depended on were canceled. Invitations stopped coming. Claire felt it the most. She had built her whole personality around being polished, admired, and respected. Now everywhere she went, she saw people whispering behind her back. Friends she used to brag to were suddenly distant. Her perfect image wasn't just cracked, it was crumbling. And she had no way to fix it because the truth was finally out in the open. My father, who had spent years building his reputation in local business circles, found himself shut out. Men who used to shake his hand and call him buddy now avoided him. They didn't want to be associated with someone under investigation. The trust he valued more than anything evaporated almost overnight. And the company, the thing they betrayed me to protect, was falling apart from every angle. Clients pulled their contracts. Workers quit. Suppliers demanded payments my father could no longer guarantee. The business that once felt solid and familiar was now a sinking ship, and everyone could see why. Corruption doesn't hold up forever. It wasn't my lawsuit that destroyed them. It wasn't my actions. It was their choices, the lies, the greed, the way they treated people like tools instead of human beings. All I did was bring the truth into the light. Standing back and watching it all unfold was strange. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. But I did feel something like justice, quiet, steady justice. The empire they tried to build by cutting me out wasn't strong at all. It collapsed under the weight of everything they'd done. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't the one losing anything. They were. When the sale officially fell apart and the investigation into the company grew, the truth became too big for my father and Claire to hide. Their lawyers tried to argue that I had no real claim, but the documents, emails, and witness statements were too strong. In the end, the law did what my family never would. It acknowledged the work I had put in all those years. I received a settlement that matched the value of the ownership I was supposed to have. It wasn't about the money as much as it was about finally being seen, finally being counted as someone who mattered. When the settlement papers were handed to me, my attorney asked if I planned to step in and restore the business, maybe even take over entirely now that their reputation was ruined. A part of me once dreamed of that, but standing there in that moment, I realized I didn't want it. That company was built on years of lies. Lies told to me, lies told about me, lies used to push me aside. The building, the equipment, the name, none of it felt like home anymore. It felt poisoned. I had no desire to fix something that had been used to hurt me. So I walked away from it. Instead, I focused on creating something new, something that actually reflected who I was and what I believed in. James was by my side from the start, offering his guidance and experience. Together, we reached out to some of the workers who had left the old business, people who had treated me with respect, people who cared about honest work, people who wanted a place where they weren't afraid of being mistreated again. Many of them said yes right away. We started small, just a few projects, a small rented space, and a group of people who believed in each other. But the work was good. The atmosphere was real. And for the first time in years, I felt excited to wake up in the morning. There were no hidden plans, no favoritism, no pressure from people who didn't value me. Everything we did was built on trust and fairness, not manipulation. Clients who had walked away from my family reached out to me, saying they'd rather work with someone honest and hardworking. New opportunities came from people who had heard what happened and respected the way I handled it. Slowly, the company grew, not because of a big name, but because of the good work we did and the way we treated people. I didn't feel proud in a loud way. It wasn't some dramatic moment where I shouted. I made it. It was quieter than that. It was the feeling of finally breathing clean air after years of holding everything inside. It was knowing I didn't belong to people who tore me down. It was understanding that rising doesn't always mean reclaiming what you lost. It sometimes means building something better from the ground up. For the first time, I felt free. Not free from work or duty, but free from the weight of people who never saw my worth. Free from the shadows I grew up in. Free from the lies that shaped my past. I wasn't rebuilding the old life they destroyed. I was building a new one they could never touch. 1 year later, Labor Day arrived with a completely different meaning. Instead of sitting at my parents' table, waiting for whatever news they wanted to throw at me, I stood in the backyard of my own home, grilling food for a group of people who had become my real family. My new team filled the place with laughter, music, and stories from the job sites we had worked on together. There were kids running around, plates piling up on tables, and the smell of food drifting through the air. It wasn't fancy, but it felt warm, honest, and full of life. James sat in a lawn chair near the grill, smiling the way he always did when he saw people enjoying themselves. The workers who had joined me when I started the new company were joking and relaxing, not worrying about favoritism or hidden deals. They talked about future projects with excitement instead of fear. It was the kind of environment I had always hoped for but never experienced in my family's company. Here, everyone was treated with respect, including me. As I handed out plates and listened to people talk about their plans, I realized I didn't miss anything about the old business. I didn't miss the building, the equipment, or the name. I didn't even miss the idea of taking it over. What I had now was better, not because it was perfect, but because it was built on truth. No lies, no manipulation, no empty promises, just real work and real people. Somewhere across town, I knew what Labor Day looked like for my father and Claire. Their business had fallen apart. The community no longer trusted them. Their partners had backed away. The people they once commanded with pride now viewed them with caution or disappointment. And their house, one that used to be full of guests and noise, was now quiet. They had wanted power, money, and control, but in chasing all of that, they lost the relationships that could have mattered. They destroyed their own empire with their choices. I didn't gloat about any of it. I didn't need to. Life had already delivered the kind of justice I never could have created myself. Their consequences came not from my anger, but from their actions. And my progress came not from revenge, but from letting go of the weight they tried to place on me. Standing in my backyard with a plate in my hand, hearing laughter rise into the warm evening air, I felt something simple and steady settle inside me, peace. The kind of peace that doesn't need to shout. The kind that grows slowly, like a seed finally given room to breathe. Their betrayal once felt like the worst thing that ever happened to me. It took away the future I thought I needed, the legacy I spent my youth believing in. But now, looking around at the people who chose to stand with me, I understood something I couldn't see back then. Losing that business opened a door I didn't know existed. I didn't just rebuild my life. I found a better one they had no control over, one they could never take away. Their betrayal gave me the freedom to become the person I was always meant to be.